Hi, welcome back to the Culture Chronicles. My name's Kate Ball. I am your host and resident bullshit exorcist. And today we're being joined by can't even say your name now, Melanie Menard. And we're going to be talking about mentoring because we've all heard the phrase lift as you climb. But let's be real. Far too many people are climbing and gatekeeping at the same time. So, in this episode, Melanie's joining me to dismantle the myth of the solo success story and shine a light on the transformative power of mentorship. From executive coaching to career defining connections, we're unpacking what it really means to show up for others and why refusing to share your knowledge isn't humility, it's hoarding. So if you've ever wondered whether mentorship makes a difference, spoiler alert, it does. And if you're not doing it, you're leaving impact and legacy on the table. So without much further ado, Melanie, would you like to introduce yourself and particularly tell us, for the benefit of everybody else that doesn't know you yet, why you are such an expert in this field?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. First of all, I'm super stoked to be here. This is literally one of my most favorite topics to talk about. I have been working within the mentoring space in some way, shape, or form, probably for the last 10 years, with a really huge emphasis on it over the last 5 years or so. I have worked at the same company for 8 years. And within that space, it became my day job. So not only did this start as a major passion project, working through affinity group work and kind of grassroots efforts to get mentoring off the ground within my organization. I had the immense fortune of taking it on as a full time job and running a very large full scale mentoring program across the company. But even more cool, I've been able to be published multiple times outside of the organization. I've been able to get to go speak at huge conferences all across the country to help elevate and lift women and underrepresented populations in the workplace and really lean into the importance of mentoring as part of a major DEI program. So I live and breathe this space. It is a huge passion of mine. And I've been able to do a lot of work over the last few years to really continuously invent and own and create and hopefully change lives as we go. So, super stoked to talk about it.
I love it. And I am a big, big advocate for mentoring as well. In actual fact, I recently did a call on LinkedIn for mentors and was overwhelmed by the amount of people that put up their hands and volunteered. So I'm a big believer it takes a village. So let's talk about this kind of, and forgive me, you know, I'm very straight talking, but it is bullshit. This kind of myth of the self made success story. Like we all hear about the Zuckerbergs and the Bezoses, and you never really hear about what it took to get them and position them to succeed in the way that they did.
Yeah. I could not agree more. I always get super frustrated by that notion because no one builds anything great completely alone, ever. The myth of being self made ignores mentors, the sponsors, the friends who talked you off a ledge, the teams who executed vision that you created. When we glamorize solo success, I think we discourage people from asking for help, and that limits growth more than anything. And I think the real truth is that collaboration and support are what accelerates success.
Yeah, and it's also that mythicism of, well, there must be something about them that I don't have because I've not achieved that already. Like,
Yeah.
oh, they obviously had, I don't know, an advantage. So I definitely think it gatekeeps. But mentoring isn't always overt. That's one thing I've noticed both personally, but also in the way it's shown up in the environments I've been part of. So have you ever mentored someone without realizing it, or had someone do that for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in both ways. I think I've had many people years later in a conversation that we had say that I showed up for them or gave them permission to take a big step just through the conversation that we were having. Or even I do, like I said, I do a ton of public speaking and talking. And I've had people who message me down the road and say, hey, like, I've been following you for ages, and like your words and your advice and your feedback have been really inspiring, and they've enabled me to really take ownership of what I'm doing in my career or my life and make changes. And I think that is so, so cool. I think there's something to be said of those formal mentoring connections 100%. But I think it's so important to recognize that how you show up in and outside of a workplace, there is always someone watching, and you have an opportunity always to make an impact. So it's always really cool when when I have people show up and tell me those stories. I think on the flip side, there are people who have never called themselves mentors to myself, but their presence in a room, how they carried themselves, how they handled pressure quietly, shaped how I lead today. So it's cool when you get to be that for somebody else. But I know for me in my career, there are so many incredible people who I've watched and just sat back and listened to throughout the years that have played such a pivotal role of I want to be like that person. And so while they're not doing anything other than just being themselves, they're having a profound impact on how I can show up and how I want to show up.
It's so true. And help me define the difference between a manager and a mentor, because I think a lot of people just assume that their manager, their immediate leader, is the person that's supposed to be guiding them. But in my personal opinion, having somebody completely removed from your day to day is far more valuable because of that objectivity.
Yeah, and I think that there's pros and cons. I think that kind of overt mentorship, where if you have an incredible leader who you can watch and be inspired by and emulate, that is an incredible person to follow. That's an incredible person to learn from and strive to be, and all of those things. But I think that there's also so many occasions where you may be struggling or going through imposter syndrome, or you have questions, or you're feeling isolated or alone. And being able to have more than just your manager or somebody to talk to in your corner, I think is so grounding, and creates that safety that I think a lot of us crave, in that like I can express that I am struggling with this person. We have a trust, we have a bond, and I can just lay it all out. I mean, I've flat out cried in mentoring sessions. I have broken down being like, I suck. What am I doing? Like, I'm not where I want to be. And like, that vulnerability and ability to just show up authentically, whether that's messy that day or at the top of your game that day, I think having people outside of your direct leadership is really profound for those reasons.
And last week I mentioned that I had done a podcast with my former mentor, and I always viewed them as like mutual therapy sessions almost, because even just in the act of the conversation, whether you're the mentor or the mentee, being able to kind of talk about and talk through your challenges. And from the mentor side, being able to relate your experience and what you've learned in both cases, I find is really therapeutic.
Yeah. I think mentoring in any way, shape, or form should always be mutually beneficial on both sides. Like, yes, in theory, your mentor is an expert on X, Y, and Z, and that's why you maybe sought them out. But in a really good mentoring connection, you should be learning and growing from each other. And over time, it really does and can start to feel like that. Like, I'm gaining as a mentor as much as I hope my mentee is gaining from me.
So, with that in mind, what's your take on people that say they're too busy to mentor?
Yeah, I am somebody who firmly believes that being busy isn't the issue. Everyone's busy. It's more about the priorities. If you value building others up, you make the time. Mentorship doesn't always have to be this big formal commitment. Sometimes a 10-minute conversation, a texted introduction, a quick review of a resume, those moments also matter. For me, I learned this from a VP several years ago. And you talk about busy. You have a very, very hectic executive, and mentoring was something that was so important to her. And so she allocated 90 minutes on her calendar every single week. And if someone reached out to her for some sort of mentoring support, as long as they could book within that 90-minute slot on any given week, they had the time with her. And I thought that was a really cool way to prioritize something in a very hectic schedule because it was important to her. And so again, I think it really comes down to is this something that I want to do? Do I want to give back? Is it important? And if the answer to any of those questions is yes, you will find a way to make the time.
So, why do you think it is that so many people wait for a title or permission to start getting involved in mentoring?
I think we tie authority to hierarchy. But mentorship is about experience, not position. If you've walked a road and someone's just starting on it, you have something to offer. So, my advice always is stop waiting. You do not need a title to lift somebody up. I'm a firm, firm, firm believer of that.
Absolutely. And most people tend to think that in order to mentor someone, you must be more senior to them. But actually, some of my more kind of beneficial mentor relationships have been with my peers. And in some cases, even with people at a lower level than me, there are always things that you can learn.
I think that's so true. I think oftentimes, again, we do associate as a culture, as a society, certain titles or levels as better than, more experienced than. But if you're starting mentoring with your why, what am I looking for? What am I hoping to gain from this? It allows you to find mentors and people who are going to have the expertise and knowledge you're looking for. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they need to have a bigger title or a higher level. Sometimes that knowledge and expertise comes through lived experience, comes through things outside of the workplace that you may not have insight to. And so, really, I always just encourage people to really understand their why for mentoring, and that really helps you identify the.
And let's talk about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship as well, because this is something that I think some people think is interrelated. And it's definitely a different approach, and the expectations tend to be quite different as well, in my understanding at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we see mentoring, coaching, and sponsorship get interchanged quite a bit. And while there are overlapping characteristics, for me, they're all fundamentally very different. When we look at sponsorship, sponsorship is where that level or title does typically matter. Sponsors elevate you in the workplace, they represent you in rooms that you're not in. The fundamental goal of a sponsor is to be an advocate to help you get from one position or place to the next position or place. Mentorship is slightly nuanced. While you may have goals of getting promoted or getting that next level or a different title, and that's what you're seeking mentorship for, your mentor is not responsible for making that happen. They're responsible for giving you the tools and resources and knowledge and insights that help you make it happen. And so they are very different. Both have goals of helping someone succeed, both have goals of making somebody better. They're just slightly nuanced in how they go about. I would say the other really big difference between sponsorship and mentorship is you may not know someone is your sponsor until you get something, until you get promoted, or that role that you've been coveting becomes available, or you get that speaking gig you've been dying for. Mentors you are seeking, sponsors you might not always be seeking.
So, what's the difference between giving advice and actually opening doors, though? What does that look like in a day to day? If somebody is starting to mentor and trying to decide what approach they want to take, like
Yeah.
where are
I'm somebody who's very gray area in this place, and it's probably because I'm hyper focused on helping people achieve their goals faster. I would say with mentorship more foundationally, it's more about what are you willing to do elevate yourself? What advice are you willing to take to elevate yourself? What tasks are you willing to do? What extra projects are you willing to do? What learning are you willing to do to get to the next level? And you're seeking out mentorship to fill in those gaps, those knowledge gaps, those skill gaps, those areas of opportunity that you might have. I think with sponsorship, there's a fundamental difference in the fact that you are looking at somebody and saying, this person is crushing it. This person has been operating at a high level for an extended period of time. They are always the first to help a teammate. They are somebody who goes above and beyond, whatever it is. I want to help them. I want to open a door for them because I see their potential, because I see that they're already doing it, because they deserve it and may not be getting it. And I think sponsors have a unique ability because of typically their higher level, their higher tenure, they're more experienced. They usually garner more respect across key important people, have the ability to say, hey, in a room, have you thought about this person for this? They might be a really good fit here. Here's why. And I think that's the difference. Mentors are not necessarily going to go walk into a room and say, hey, have you thought about this person? I was mentoring them the other day and I've heard some really good things. They're not innately close enough to the work you're doing to be able to go open that door.
Yeah. So we're basically saying your sponsor is your champion
Yeah.
and your mentor is like your guide.
Yeah. I like it like that.
Yeah. And so I know, I mean, obviously, we all grow over the course of our careers. And very, very early days, I did a mental health qualification. I studied counseling. And one of the things that I was taught, which didn't come naturally to me at all, is instead of helping people find the right answers, you need to teach them how to ask the right questions so that they can get to those answers on their own. And I think when I started mentoring earlier in my career, I wanted to fix problems for people. And I misunderstood that that was my role, was to find the answers and the solutions for them. And definitely in the last few years, at least, I don't know exactly when the transition occurred, but I definitely moved away from that and started instead employing that kind of counseling approach of asking the questions to help people get to the right answers themselves.
Yeah.
Like, can you tell me what is the correct approach for people who are trying to figure out how to be the best mentor they can be?
Yeah, I think the first thing, and I've coached on this quite a bit, is stop projecting your path onto someone else. Your way is not the only way. And I think if you start listening, like really listening, mentorship is a two-way conversation and not a monologue. So the best mentors I know ask more questions than they answer. And I think that fits really nicely to your point, Kate. Like I started asking more questions or getting them to ask the right questions. And I think as really good mentors, to your point, we sometimes want to just solve the problems for them because we want to make their path easier than our was. And we're like, hey, like this happened to me too. Here's what I did. You should do this. And if we're really sitting back and listening, their path is not usually going to be the same as ours. And so if we start to ask those questions and really listening, I think we can get to a place where we're able to not solve the problems for them, but help empower them to solve their problems.
And have you ever had a mentee like completely change your perspective? I know I have.
1,000,000%. I am somebody, I am super tough and I love a good debate and I love when mentees push back. It is one of my favorite things. But I had someone challenge how I approached feedback and they helped me see how my straight talk was landing in ways that I really did not intend. And I think it made me rethink how I communicate, especially across like differences, and that she shifted my actual leadership style, I think, for the better. So they challenged me in a mentoring connection, but it ultimately really helped me think about how I was approaching conversations and communicating across my career. And it was actually kind of profound for me.
I love that. And so you and I, our paths crossed several times at Amazon, and we were both very active and visible in the communities that we championed. So I know, obviously, this was your role as well, but I know you will have had the same experience I did, where I regularly was almost fending off approaches and requests for mentorship. And it at times could feel quite overwhelming trying to decide who I was giving my time to, kind of prioritizing who was deserving of that time and how it was going to benefit us mutually. So, what advice do you have for people who are starting out in their mentorship career and they're looking to identify who they should be partnering with?
Yeah, I think that there's two components here. I think that there's a component of individuals who go into it believing that mentorship has to be earned. And I think that mindset is a gatekeeping tactic, even if it's unintentional. I think everybody deserves access to growth, and mentorship shouldn't be a reward. It should be how we operate as leaders. I think if we're only pouring into the top performers, we are missing the talent that just needs a chance. So I'll start with that because I think that's really important. And I think to kind of subsidize that, time is always going to be a barrier. We talked about it at the beginning of this conversation. I think a lot of us, where we are so passionate about this, want to dedicate as much time as we can, but it's not always possible. And so for me, one of the things that I've really done, and I think it's beneficial for them in the long run, is identifying if I am a good fit to be their mentor. And so what I typically ask when I've been approached is, hey, put together some bullet points and key areas that you want to focus on. What are your biggest challenges? What are you hoping to gain from this mentoring connection? What skills or expertise are you looking for? And I think by being able to really review and have them hone in, we're starting in a really good place if I do take them on, um, of a very clear, raw understanding of what support they need. But I think it also allows me to say, hey, like, I'm super flattered. I appreciate you reached out. I don't actually think I'm the best fit based on what you're looking for. I may know somebody who is a better fit. Let me connect you to them. Or hey, can I support you in any way in finding somebody who may be a better fit? It's okay to say no if you're not the right person to support them. I do sometimes have to say no, but that's in their best interest. And I still almost always try and see if there's somebody I know who may be a good fit to support them.
So I recall, and we're going back a couple of years, and I never really got to see what happened with this, but I remember, or at least I think I do, that you were experimenting with introducing like cohorts rather
Mm.
than one-on-one mentoring. I don't know what happened with that, if it was successful or not, but can we just talk about that and what your experiences were, and if that's something you would recommend to other people to adopt?
Yeah, I have done cohort mentoring in a few different facets, both as part of my day job for managers, but also very organically through my affinity group work. And it is so much fun. It is a great way if you're an organization who wants to invest in mentoring, but you want to do something fun and interesting outside of your traditional one on one space. Cohort mentoring is a great way to do it. The way that I did it with affinity group work was through what we call speed mentoring. So it's kind of like speed dating for real. Like, we did 25-minute sessions. We had topics where we would have experts come in for those particular topics. So let that be imposter syndrome or influencing without authority. And you would sit and you would talk, you would meet your peers, you would sit with the expert, you would dive into that conversation for 25 minutes, a bell would ring, and you would subsequently then go to your next topic, and we would run them for 90 minutes. So you could do 3 topics. And what I found, which was super cool, is not only did people want to connect with the experts because they're super knowledgeable about those topics, but they now had a peer network that they could connect with. And that was really, really valuable. Highly recommend. They're super fun.
Awesome. And one of the things now that I'm in a consulting business, obviously I work with lots of different companies, and I found my sweet spot at the moment to be like the small and medium sized enterprises as opposed to like the Amazon behemoths.
Mhm.
And so a lot of these organizations are still trying to figure out how to introduce a robust mentorship program, because there tends to be that belief that it's down to the individual to find their mentor. But what companies are trying to do is find a way to kind of from very beginning, day one onboarding, have an assigned mentor. So what what does your expertise say in terms of what works and how companies can implement something more structured?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think mentoring programs can be incredibly daunting, whether it's a large company or a small company. There's a lot of nuances. And I think if you're looking to really create a structured approach to mentoring, there are low cost, high impact companies that you can leverage now that are incredibly valuable to allow you to create a high impact, low touch program. I'll start there because I think that's really important. There are technologies and companies that support this particular thing. They meet you where you are in your business type. They are very flexible in terms of pricing and what you're getting for your licenses and your packages. And I think that is something not a lot of people think about. I think when people say, oh, I'm going to invest in technology, it has to be the big companies. That's not true. A lot of these companies work with small and medium sized businesses to help you get programs for mentoring, sponsorship, coaching off the ground. I think if you're looking to kind of create some high impact, low lift within the workplace without using any sort of technology, I think that there's lots of things that you can do. Appoint a champion. Have somebody who's deeply passionate about this space be a champion, whether it's one person or a committee of people, and assign. You can create different mechanisms like Excel spreadsheets with lists of what someone's good at or what they're SMEs at, or subject matter experts, and they can connect them. But I also think it can be as simple as giving shout outs in meetings and forwarding someone's name for a project, reviewing a resume, sharing your calendar for 15-minute chats, sending a voice note of encouragement. I think visibility and access are huge. So those quick touches can make bigger differences than I think most people would imagine they would. And so I think you as a leader or you as an organization can very simply drive a culture of mentorship that doesn't require champions, technology. If you talk about your experiences, you make yourself available for mentorship, that's going to trickle down within your organization because you're creating that authentic kind of open door. I see them thriving because they're doing this environment that other people want to emulate. So I think there's multiple approaches. Technology is obviously the easiest one. There's companies that support. I think, again, some of those kind of nuancy, opening up your calendar, sharing a resume, forwarding someone's name is another way. And then I think part three is really driving that culture from the top down. And that starts by talking about it, showing it, making it real.
While we're talking about that top down culture, and I couldn't agree with you more, but I can't help but think back over the course of my career, and I've probably had 30 plus managers over my career. And of those, less than half are what I would consider to be good managers, inspirational leaders, people I wanted to learn from. So, from an accountability and reward standpoint, how what advice would you have for business leaders who need to be able to recognize not only the value that mentorship brings, but also driving the accountability and ensuring that the people delivering it are the right people, or that at least there is some kind of conformity of standard?
Yeah, I mean, people always say, you leave a manager, not a job, and I think that's paramount, and so true. And I think, people follow people that they are inspired by and encouraged by and are supported by, people they can trust, people they can be authentic with. And I think that typically starts at the top, but it doesn't always have to. And I think that we want organizations and leaders to invest in understanding what mentorship is, understanding what sponsorship is, understanding what the impact those things can make in the workplace. We want them to know and live and breathe and be empowered by it and share that with their teams. But I think it's equally as important, and this is something I've always done. I am the squeaky wheel. I am somebody who is continuously sharing articles with my managers and saying, hey, look, did you see this McKinsey or Harvard Business Review on the impact that mentoring is having in all of these different organizations? How do we involve ourselves in that? How do we continue to be better? And I think if we have leaders who believe in the why, the and what mentoring and sponsorship can do, And then you have employees who are equally as passionate about being the best versions of themselves, about educating upward, about influencing without authority. I think you're breeding a really beautiful kind of synergy in the workplace. What I think is really hard is when you have employees who believe in the why and keep trying to knock down doors and they're not getting anywhere. That's going to create an environment that's not tenable because you have employee human centered people with non human centered people focused leadership, and that's never going to work. You need that really pretty symbiotic experience between the two. But if you're a leader, I mean, there is so much data. 10 years ago, we may be having a different conversation, but at this point, you cannot deny the impact and benefits of mentoring in the workplace. It increases inclusion, diversity, um, productivity, reduced like PXT incidents because people feel more supported and included. You have higher performers. That's good for customers. Like, there are just so many benefits. So if you're a leader at this point, do some research, invest in mentoring, really make it a priority, and don't discourage employees who want to do it grassroots or want to spend time doing it. Encourage that behavior.
Fantastic. And we're coming up to time, unfortunately, but there is one last thing I wanted to ask. And the reality is, the last few years, last 5 years, God, it's getting long, we've seen so much transience and upheaval in the workplace. And so, from a legacy perspective, where you do have these leaders and these relationships moving on, we have an aging population in the workforce as well. And inevitably, are seeing more and more of those kind of historic mentors retiring. So, what does legacy look like to you when it comes to mentorship, and what should businesses be doing to counter that transience that we're seeing right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think investing in the why is really important, right? Like, if people understand the power of mentoring and what it can do in a workplace, they're more inclined to invest in it. They're more inclined to say, hey, I want to be a mentor. Because I think at the end of the day, legacy is who grows because of you. It's not about your name on a plaque, it's about the doors you opened and the leaders you helped shape. So, if more people mentored with legacy in mind, workplaces would be more inclusive, more resilient, and way more human. And so I think as leaders and employees, I think really to maintain and continue to see workplaces thrive through mentorship, it takes a village of people saying, hey, like, this is important. We need to continue to invest in people. Here's why. And so I've been a huge advocate of educating people on the power of mentoring and why they should invest in it. And really just being an advocate of encouraging that behavior. Because I think as we start to see experts leave, we have another crop of experts coming in, right? We're building them, they're molding, they're forming right now. I learned from my mentors. Some of my mentors are retired or out on their own doing different things now. And like, the best thing that I can do is show up and be what they were for me for the next generation. And I think as long as we can all keep that in mind, I think we'll be okay.
Sustainability, the key word. Well, Melanie, I really appreciate you joining us. Obviously, I've always been a big fan of your work and everything you do, not just within the mentoring community, but just to make workplaces suck less and be more human. So I'm a big fan and champion of yours. If I can ever return the favor, just give me a holler. But otherwise, just thank you for showing up today and talking to us. Really
That's
appreciate
so
your time.
kind. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been an absolute pleasure. And hopefully, this helps somebody, pick up mentorship. And that's all we can ask for. So, thank you.
Inspiring the next generation. I love it. Bye, everyone. We'll see you again next week. Bye.